I now give the floor to Mr. Tor Wennesland.
Mr. President, Excellencies, members of the Security Council. Following the Secretary General's statement, I will focus my briefing on dynamics in the occupied West Bank, the region, and where we go from here in the context of the unfolding conflict between Israel and Palestinian militants in Gaza. Before doing so, I wish to join the Secretary Generals in acknowledging the efforts of Qatar, Egypt, and US in facilitating an agreement that has secured the release of 60 Israeli hostages from Gaza so far, resulted in a 6-day pause in fighting, which allowed the UN to scale up humanitarian aid, as well as led to the release of 180 Palestinian prisoners and detainees from Israeli custody. Such respite from weeks of horror is long overdue. Mr. President, while the world's attention has been rightly focused on the devastating violence and outbreaks of hostilities since 7 October, we are also witnessing a heightened tension, intensive violence, and widespread movement restrictions across the occupied West Bank. The period has been marked by some of the most intensive Israeli operations in the West Bank since the Second Intifada, involving the use of improvised explosive devices by armed Palestinians and drone strikes by Israeli security forces. Tulkarem and Jenin has seen the largest scale Israeli operations, including inside the refugee camps. Settler violence has also continued at high levels, driving mounting tension and increased violence, as well as Palestinian displacement. In all, 154 Palestinians, including 37 children, have been killed this reporting period in the West Bank, nearly all of them in the context of Israeli operations, many involving armed exchanges with Palestinians. 2 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli settlers. 3 Israelis, including 2 security forces, were killed by Palestinian attacks. Mr. President, amid the surging violent and extensive Israeli movement restriction, the Palestinian Authority's long-standing fiscal crisis have worsened significantly as economic activity in the West Bank has grown to a halt and the economy of Gaza collapsed. The 2nd November decision by the Israeli Security Cabinet to deduct, quote, all funds designed for Gaza Strip, unquote, from the clearance revenue Israeli transferred to the PA further weakened revenues, impacting many critical services and the payment of public sector salaries, including to the security forces. The situation is boiling and getting worse rapidly. In the months before the war, I warned regularly in this council that more must be done to help stabilize the situation in the West Bank. That is more the case now than ever before. Mr. President, a few words on the regional dynamics and my continued concern about the risk for further escalation. Turning to Israel's north, while tension along the blue line have calmed in recent days, the situation remains volatile, and it was through the reporting period. Approximately 100,000 Israelis remain displaced from communities in the north, and some 50,000 Lebanese are displaced from southern areas near the blue line. On the Golan, firing from Syria towards the Israeli-occupied Golan and strikes by Israelis against targets in Syria took place. From further afield, missiles and drones were also reportedly launched from Yemen towards Israel. Most were intercepted. However, drone strikes claimed by the Houthis hit a school in Eilat on 9 November. A ship affiliated to an Israeli businessman was seized by Houthis forces in the Red Sea on 19 November. Mr. President, the dizzying pace of events and staggering needs on the ground make it difficult to see beyond the most immediate challenges. Nevertheless, we must begin work on what comes next. Without an effective political and security framework for when the fighting ceases, it will be impossible to sustainably end the violence and shape a new reality. Over the coming weeks and months, the international community must increase their engagement with Israel, the PA, and regional partners on constructive and practical political solutions. While much is unknown about how this war will end, some absolutes are clear. Acts of terror, like those Hamas and others committed against Israel on October 7th, must never be allowed to happen again. And Palestinians in Gaza must never ever again experience the horrors they have endured. Gaza is and must remain an integral part of a future Palestinian state, with both Gaza and West Bank under the Palestinian Authority. The only viable path is one that leads to an end of the occupation and the realization of a two-state solution in line with UN resolutions, previous agreements, and international law. Our past efforts have certainly not been enough. A message that resonates in particular today as we mark the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. There must be a new and different approach, or we are doomed to return to the path of managing a conflict that clearly cannot be managed. Thank you.